Thank you very much, Savita, for being at Binghamton University and the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention as a practitioner in residence, and for being willing to spend a little bit of time talking to us today. I was hoping you could just start by giving us a little bit of background information about yourself and also about the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, first of all. And it's great to be here because, as I was saying it to Max yesterday, that it just gives you a moment to take a step back and reflect on things which we generally don't do, and it's just one thing after the other. But I work at the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect. I'm the Deputy Executive Director there, and I've been there for a while and feel very much that in this journey of the norm of the responsibility to protect, I have seen it from like a very nascent stage to what it is today. In terms of myself, I am a national of India. That's where I come from. I came to the US to do my master's, and then one thing led to the other. And I work on R2P and international protection issues, and that's exactly what I've wanted to do all my life. So it's been a great journey, and it's a great experience, and I'm learning so much.
So you mentioned R2P. For people who may not know what that means, what does that stand for, and what does that mean in terms of the practice of your work?
So R2P means responsibility to protect, and it's about responsibility to protect populations from four conscience-shocking crimes of genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Responsibility to protect is a political and operational response to the failures of Rwanda and in former Yugoslavia, in Srebrenica especially, and it's about the world coming together, the international community coming together, and sort of accepting this responsibility by saying that every state has a primary responsibility to protect its populations from these four crimes. The international community must assist and provide help or capacity building to countries to uphold this responsibility. But if the state is manifestly failing, that is, it's either unable or unwilling, then it's a responsibility of the international community to take timely and decisive action in accordance with the UN Charter. So it's essentially about protecting populations, and we don't say citizens, we say populations, from these four crimes. And I think that as a norm, it's a very young norm, but the amount of sort of attention it has received, the amount of the work, academic work that is being done on it, R2P is truly special in that it resonates. I mean, despite the many criticisms that it is about regime change or it's a very Western-centric norm, it has captured the imagination of from academics to civil society across the world who believe that states have a responsibility to protect their populations, that we should not be standing by, and we should actually make the words "never again" a reality rather than just making it a rhetoric.
So you're mentioning responsibility of state actors. You don't actually work for a government.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about the organization that you do work for and how it contributes to helping states fulfill their responsibility to protect?
So the Global Center for Responsibility to Protect the mandate of the organization is to move the norm forward from rhetoric to reality. And it's all about making the norm more effective and for its effective operationalization, essentially. And the way the Global Center does it is through three different ways we do it. So one is through advocacy, and we are a typical sort of human rights organization. The naming, shaming element, working with states to sort of change narrative sometimes, because sometimes states use counter-terrorism or democracy promotion to sort of, or conflict resolution to sort of ignore the atrocity element. So our job through our advocacy is very much to maintain the attention of states and say that these are the possible risks of atrocities happening in this situation. And it is, we create political will, we see who has leverage, and very much work with the UN Security Council and the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva to bring attention of, policymakers and actors who have influence. The other part of our job is obviously research, which I should have mentioned before I said advocacy. We are one of the only organizations actually in the world who has, monthly publications, weekly publications. And what we do is that we look at the world from an atrocity prevention lens. So we see that, where is the risk or the potential of atrocities occurring? How, what can we do to prevent? Who should take what kind of action to be able to prevent or halt atrocities effectively. So very much applying the lens of atrocity prevention throughout the world and seeing where the risks are. And then we take this research and then do, more targeted advocacy. And the final part of the puzzle of, moving forward the norm of the responsibility to protect is to build institutions around atrocity prevention. So what does that mean? It means that from building consensus within the General Assembly to sort of, within governments, either building departments or smaller sort of specialized desks around R2P, to, institutional mechanisms within the United Nations Secretariat. So there's a group of friends of R2P. We helped establish it in New York as well as in Geneva. And the group of friends of R2P is 50 member states within the General Assembly. And their job essentially is to build consensus around the norm. We are also the Secretariat for the R2P Focal Points Initiative. We were the organization which launched it with Denmark and Ghana in 2010. And the aim or the impulse behind creating the global network of R2P Focal Point was to take this discussion out of New York and Geneva and to take it to capital, and to mainstream it within governments, that you have somebody who's very senior, responsible for atrocity prevention policies and how that government views atrocity prevention within their systems. We work very closely with the UN system, so with Department of Peace Operations, for example, in seeing how the atrocity prevention lens can be more effectively used for the threat assessments they do within peacekeeping settings. So that requires a lot of attention, awareness raising, education around what this actually means. So then that's what I mean by, we build institutions around it. So it becomes something that people know how to do on a day-to-day basis. And we have so much to learn from other, areas such as, human rights. How have we translated all these commitments, this principle, the Declaration of Human Rights, into everyday programming and work. And the intention with the Global Center's work around building institutions is that we create or unpack what it actually means to prevent atrocities and to halt atrocities by including it in, the day-to-day tasks of different departments and agencies.
You mentioned the importance of research is guiding your advocacy
Yes.
work and capacity development work. To what extent does the Global Center for R2P partner with academic organizations? What is your current relationship with academic partners, and where do you see the opportunity for an institute like the one at Binghamton to collaborate and help you be able to achieve your organizational objectives?
So, there are different kinds of ways in which we engage with research. So one is the research that we do and we produce. So sometimes it's through primary resources, people on the ground, and sometimes it's through secondary sources, that is UN reports to reports from, the Human Rights Council coming out of, all of these different procedures. So that's the work which is around sort of what is happening in the now. And we might look at, some primary or secondary research done by academics around that. But this is something which is very sort of, focused on a particular country in that moment, what is happening and who should do what. So it's very much focused on policy. But where we have sort of done, I mean, not collaborations, but we work, for example, with the Asia Pacific Center which is based in Queensland in Australia, and with Alex Bellamy around, possible events around some particular policy briefs. I mean, right now we are doing something around the Uyghurs in China, because I know that they have the specialty to look at China, and they have specialists there who have been working on the issue of Uyghurs for a very long time. So it totally depends on how and where we are able to collaborate with different academics. I mean, we are resource for a lot of academics, actually, so the relationship is actually the other way around. Given that we are the repository of, most of the work, or most of the statements, or most of the UN reports that are coming out of different agencies on the responsibility to protect. So we are a place where a lot of academics come to get those resources and to sort of, begin a dialogue or to begin a conversation on many, many topics. So that's sort of been our collaboration till now, but we very much look forward to seeing how, I mean, especially with your work on how you can bring academic work to practitioners in a more sort of organic way, is something that we are really interested in, and we'll definitely explore ways in which we can do this better.
Obviously, at a university, one of our primary missions is the education of the next generation of students. For students, thinking about prevention of mass atrocities is, in many instances, an overwhelming concept that they can't necessarily wrap their heads around. By definition, we are talking about mass-scale events. What would you say to young people coming in and beginning their college studies about opportunities for them to contribute to prevention, whether that's pursuing a career path that's similar to your own, or other ways in which you see that students can make a difference?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think that many times I get asked questions as to what they can do to prevent or halt atrocities as citizens. So in that way, I mean, engage with the world, learn about the world around you. But in terms of sort of very concrete things that they can do to prevent atrocities, I think that we were having this conversation yesterday. We as citizens and people, I mean, I don't want to instrumentalize everything, but in every position that you're in, having a sense of that these crimes can happen anywhere, anytime. And given the world that we are living in, where we are seeing a rise in xenophobia and hate crimes and hate speech, just being very aware of it, within your own communities, within your own organizations, to raise awareness, to be, sort of, show your support to good initiatives rather than to participate in any kind of, any kind of events or any kind of speech that leads to further problems is something that you can be aware of. But in terms of sort of, if this is a field that you want to get into, so one of the ways is to look at it from a perspective of, doing human rights work. So, from Human Rights Watch to Amnesty International, these very big organizations, to also like domestic organizations which work on different kinds of rights and promotion of different kinds of rights, to more technical fields. I mean, I would say specialize in transitional justice, specialize in how to uphold rule of law, specialize in security sector, understanding how security sectors work, do public administration, but with a view of how you can get administrations, get bureaucracies to respond in a effective manner. And again, I mean, from disaster relief, there's so many different avenues that you can get into, which help prevent atrocities. And I mean, and as I think aware citizens, I mean, the world is getting smaller with social media, with all of these different things out there. So just being aware, being responsible citizens, I think that's something that can really contribute. And we should not make light of this. I think that we are living in the world today. It's because we have stopped being responsible citizens. So I think that being a responsible citizen is the first thing that you should do, and you can do it.
Let's return to a little bit more of the technical side of R2P. Can you explain a little bit about the three pillars and how the Global Center works with each of those three pillars?
So the three pillars of R2P is, as the norm is laid out, in the sense that the first pillar is about the state responsibility. So it's a responsibility of the state to protect its population. And how can it do that? So again, there are inhibitors which inoculate society from, commission of atrocity crimes. And what are those? And they're not that different from, things that lead to good governance. So, for example, having a responsible, free press, responsible and free media, having a judiciary which is independent, having access to be able to access to justice systems, acknowledging past crimes, acknowledging that there has been a history of atrocities, memorializing, creating memorials for people who have lost their lives or acknowledging that loss. From transitional justice mechanisms to, as I said before, and I keep on saying this again and again, responsible security sectors. A police which is responsive. No police is perfect in the world, but a police which is, basically is doing its job in most places at most times for most people. So these are some of the ways in which states can do a better job. Also, good legislation around hate crimes, around hate speech, minority protection. Again, good legislation on that. So these are some of the ways in which a state can prevent atrocities from happening, giving constitutional guarantees to certain minorities and individuals. And the way we work with states around this is to tell them about good practice, to connect them to other states who are doing good practice around these kinds of issues. So, and this is the first step. If we are able to get this step correct, you don't need pillar 2 or pillar 3, And pillar 2 is very much about from capacity. And this is about the international community assisting a state to upholding its responsibility. Now, what does the term international community means? It means the UN system, bilateral aid. Like a lot of countries provide bilateral aid, regionally through their regional organizations they provide. So EU gives tons of aid to different countries around the world. And again, like when they're providing aid, having a lens of atrocity prevention within that. So, first of all, being very conscious that you're not doing any harm. So the development aid you are giving is not actually leading to further atrocities or is not adding to tensions which are already existing in communities, but actually is able to bring communities together. Capacity building, again, training judges to paralegals, so that more people can have access to justice. Again, helping in constitutional reform or constitutional development, helping in training police forces and training them in a way that they are then able to do a better job in upholding, rule of law. And again, also training bureaucrats, training diplomats, training diplomats so that when they are negotiating within their own countries a deal with, let's say, a diamond company, then they actually have the tools to be able to do that, So, it's like capacity building. It's also denying means of committing atrocities. So if you know that the weapons that you're selling are actually going to be used to commit atrocities, you don't do that. If you feel that, through your borders, a lot of weapons are flowing or means to perpetrate atrocities are getting across the borders, close your borders. So, it's also about denying the means to perpetrators, financial aid. If you think that you're training security services then who go and commit atrocities, stop training them. So there are many ways in which the international community can assist and also deny perpetrators the means to commit atrocities. Then the pillar 3 is very much a coercive. It's the sharper end, and it is when the international community has to step in if a state is unwilling or unable. And again, the unable part is sometimes is just lack of capacity. So bolstering the capacity of the state in protecting its own populations. And we are seeing this happening in Central African Republic, in DRC to some extent, where we are helping the government in establishing its state structures and protecting its own populations. But the other part of the coercive, non-coercive elements of Pillar 3 is very much sort of non-coercive would be, mediation support, good offices, either bilaterally or through the UN system, the UN Secretariat. And then there are sort of, through the UN Security Council, because R2P is, part of, R2P can only be applied in the context of or in accordance with the UN Charter. And again, through the Security Council, imposing of arms embargo, targeted sanctions, freezing of assets, and then you go to the sharper end, which is also, imposition of the no-fly zone, referring the case to the International Criminal Court, and then, you have the full-blown sort of military intervention. And again, I want to just say a few words on this military intervention as a tool, is that, you have to have a better understanding of what the tool is being used for. It should always be on the table. In a case like Rwanda, it would have been really useful, but in a case like South Sudan, is that the only way to go forward? So know for what purpose you're using which tool. And the way we work with governments is to sort of advise them on how to use these tools, what kind of tools do they have in their arsenal so that they can use it, who has the leverage to be able to use a particular tool most effectively. But in terms of Pillar 2, we constantly caution them about, whatever way you're approaching a particular problem, use the lens of atrocity crime, see how it doesn't then lead to further tensions within a particular community.
Can you share with us some examples of success stories from R2P at any one of the stages? And clearly there's not clear demarcations between those three pillars, kind of happening simultaneously in some instances. But some examples of where you think individual countries or the international community have done things well.
I think that there are many examples of successes, and when I say, failures sometimes are so big, and especially in the world that we're living today with Myanmar, Syria. It's 68.5 million people who are displaced currently. This is the largest number of people displaced ever. So the failures are so big sometimes that it's very hard to identify successes. And there are successes, but they are smaller. A big success which everybody talks about is definitely Kenya. And again, it's very important to look at Kenya and learn lessons from Kenya, because it was the Kenyans themselves, after the 2007-2008 violence which happened right after the elections. The Kenyans took responsibility, and the next round of cycle, the next round of elections, there were many processes which were put into place. Of course, with assistance of international mediation led by Kofi Annan, there were like long-term goals around constitutional reform, land reform, to sort of very short-term goals on, curbing hate speech, on reconciliation efforts. So they took a lot of responsibilities and made sure that the elections were not completely violence-free, but they were peaceful, and they led to a peaceful transition of power. Gambia is another success. Where you see a regional organization coming together, regional powers coming together, and telling a head of state that you just cannot not accept the results of the election and perpetrate atrocities. So again, Gambia is a success story. In a way, I would say that there's some renewal of certain accountability mechanisms. With Syria, we have felt that there was no way to go. The UN Security Council has been so blocked for any kind of action because of the power play between the different UN Security Council members. But then the General Assembly came together and said, okay, fine, we can't take action right now, but let's create mechanisms through which we can actually collect all the evidence that is coming out of Syria and create a mechanism where this evidence can be, verified and stored for, any future trials and future accountability processes. And the international independent mechanism which has been established, the IIIM on Syria, is very innovative, and it's again a way in which countries are coming together. They're doing something similar around Myanmar too, because you just don't want to just let go of the evidence. On Yemen recently, this was at the end of last year, one of the only ways in which there is very independent reporting on the violations that are happening in Yemen is through the, eminent panel of eminent experts, which is a Geneva-based mechanism which releases reports on, how many violations of IHL are occurring, who are the culprits, and it's a very important. It's one of the only mechanisms which is working, and the renewal of that, which was not an easy process, but to get it renewed and to be able to keep the eye on what is happening in Yemen. So these are like smaller successes which we see, which are very, very important. They're not making a difference in people's lives today, but we hope that they give hope to those who are suffering, that their suffering is not just not being witnessed. So we are bearing witness. So there are many ways in which small things are happening. It's nothing compared to the suffering that is also taking place. But we have to keep on keeping on.
In your work, you must have the opportunity to deal with people from many different countries and at various levels in their political systems.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found most challenging about the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think. And I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound a very obvious answer. In the end, states have interest, and those interests determine, how much action they're going to take on a particular situation. Sometimes the very sort of ideological reasons, the reasons to do good, actually do not work. It's. But I'm saying that I also say that there are sometimes some leverage points which work. And again, this is not about big successes. I think that big successes are a result of many small successes coming together, and to make those small successes happen, and sometimes it's an incredibly frustrating process to convince governments and again, I always say this, that governments are not monolithic. There are so many different actors and stakeholders within each government. So how do you sort of get them mobilized so that they are mobilized in the right direction? And this is not always easy, and that's some of the hardest part of it. But then when it all comes together, then you also see, on a very positive note, you actually see the power of people. You truly... One of the most rewarding parts of the job is to see that how individuals can actually make a difference. You can change the world if you want to, and that's one of the best things to be able to see. But one of the most frustrating parts is that it takes time. You have to be very stubborn. You have to continue doing your work despite many challenges. And in the end, the people who are at the middle of this, and in which you always have to remind yourself about, is not yourself. This is in the end a career, you're getting paid to do this work, but people who are actually suffering. So also be humble enough to listen to them. They have most of the answers than you do. We have a tendency, and this is not part of the answer, but we have a tendency in the international community to believe that we know all the answers. And many a times, people who are actually the most important stakeholders in this entire enterprise, the people of Yemen, the people of South Sudan, the people of Syria themselves, we don't actually listen to them when they have most of the solutions to these problems.
So you mentioned in the response to the question about challenges, some of the things that are rewarding. So let's finish on a positive note. Share with us an example of a particularly rewarding experience that you've had at doing this work.
I mean, I'm not going to name names, but but I mean, we did a lot of work. I mean, this is a few years ago. I did a lot of work in West Africa, and I felt that that was a great space to have multiple conversations at different levels. So from the civil society stakeholders to sort of governments to think tanks and about R2P, and to create champions there on the responsibility to protect. And the reason we thought about West Africa was a region where, we saw some of the early, like before R2P was even sort of born or understood, early interventions by states to protect populations, be it in Liberia or in Sierra Leone. And one of the most rewarding experiences was that, you had really fantastic diplomats who were interested in these conversations, were then able to build this consensus in New York and say that this is not only about sort of a Western norm. I mean, in these countries, we benefited from having a sharper end of Pillar 3. And I mean, I'm surprised every day because you see so many, sometimes bureaucracies are really, fatiguing, but sometimes you see like really sort of dynamic people who have amazing solutions. To this one story, we met this Malawian peacekeeper, and he was telling us that, how he was in this sector where women, every time they would go into the forest to collect wood, they would be attacked. And they saw this pattern, and then like one of them suggested that why don't we just accompany these women, just be around, so protection with presence. And it's like these kinds of stories that, that people are able to do, and to just, save even one life or save one woman from being molested, are really, heartening, like some good lessons, some good practices that emerge. So that's what keeps us going, because I think that we have made a lot of progress. I mean, it's not, human rights are acknowledged as a right of individuals across the world. I mean, you have opposition to it, but, I feel that in the last 60, 70 years, we have made progress. I mean, I would say that, Cambodia happened and Pol Pot could do that. I don't know whether, given the same circumstances, it could still happen. I think that there is more, less tolerance for this, but, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm hopeful.
We're going to hope that you are correct in your hopefulness. Thank you so much, Savita, for taking time to chat with us.
Thank you for having me.